Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with a midweek update in the world of cannabis. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And then, of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos. And then there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you're ready. But we're going to start with some big news that definitely helped move the market a little bit yesterday, as Verano announces that they enter coveted New York, Minnesota, and New Mexico markets with proposed acquisition of Goodness Growth Holdings. And so there's a lot more detail in here, but I'm just going to focus on a few snippets and then walk through the press release as upon consummation of the acquisition. That's a very interesting choice of words to use there. Verano's footprint will span 18 states with active operations in 15, including 17 cultivation facilities totaling 1.3 million square feet of cultivation capacity and 111 active dispensaries. Well, just going to jump down to the bottom here, and this is according to BDSA data. So the footnote here references BDSA at the bottom of the page. Between 2022 and 2026, these net new markets are expected to generate combined revenue of more than $13.8 billion. And so obviously, this is why Verano is very happy to announce that they've entered into a definitive arrangement agreement pursuant to which Verano will acquire all of the issued and outstanding shares of Goodness in an all-share transaction valued at approximately $413 million on a fully diluted basis. So they're paying $413 million to get exposure to this large of a market. So it seems like a pretty good deal. I can't complain. I'm very happy about that as a Goodness Growth shareholder. And under the terms of the arrangement agreement, it is expected that each holder of Goodness subordinate voting shares will receive 0.226 of a Verano Class A subordinate voting share for each Goodness subordinate voting shares held. And then each holder of Goodness multiple voting shares or super voting shares, which are shares that I do not own because I'm just a common class shareholder, those shareholders will receive 22.6 Verano shares for each Goodness multiple voting share and Goodness super voting share held respectively. And so if you want to do that math, you would just take the number of Goodness Growth shares you have if you own Goodness Growth and multiply by 0.226, and that will tell you how many shares it would convert to once this deal were to be approved and completed and closed. And so just wanted to provide some transaction highlights. This basically tells you everything that they're buying that Goodness Growth owns, so you can just pause to read if you want all the information here, and then you can pause to read this snippet that adds a little bit at the bottom. And then just to add terms of the transaction, based on the 15-day volume-weighted average price of Verano ending January 27th, 2022, and a Canadian-US exchange rate of 0.79, the transaction implies a price per Goodness subordinate voting share of US $2.64, which would be the equivalent to over $3 US Canadian. But this is why we saw a 43% gain yesterday, because obviously if Verano is valuing them at this much, then there's reason to believe that the share price will go up because the market cap should be worth at least this much. So that helps explain the nice day that we saw yesterday, which was a huge day for the cannabis sector, and hopefully that can continue. And so just wanted to share this snippet from Adam Grossman, who put this together, an acquisition analysis. So you can check this one out. Very informative, mind you. Again, it's just some guy making this, but obviously it helps paint a clear picture as to why Verano certainly wanted to pick up Goodness Growth and why it would benefit them if they did. And while the Verano press release did use that BDSA number that looked at $13.8 billion by 2026, keep in mind, I think that's referring to all of what Verano's existing footprint already has, plus what any footprint of Goodness Growth is that they're going to bring in. So a better way of looking at it is the total acquisition cost to buy Goodness, $413 million, then setting aside some money for capital expenditures, construction costs, and expansion. So the total consideration, roughly $613 million. To consider that they're spending that in order to get $3 billion of market value back, probably by 2025, once New York, New Mexico, and Minnesota comes online, that makes a whole lot more sense as to why they'd be doing that. And so while I have you here, just sharing this analysis by Adam Grossman, so I want to say thank you to Adam. Monolith also shares this analysis by Adam Grossman, so just wanted to share this one. And so whether you're new to the space or more of a short-term minded trader as opposed to long-term investor, this is a great way to zoom out and remind yourself of the big picture, and not only how much more work we still have, but how far we have actually come, especially over the last 2 years to get to where we are now. So you can check this out, why it's compelling, why the massive discount, what will trigger uplisting, what's the upside potential, and what companies we will be investing in. So great little resource. Again, thank you, Adam Grossman, for sharing. On to this one from Global Newswire. As North America Legal Cannabis Market Report 2022, apparently the market size is expected to reach $38.2 billion by 2028, registering a compounded annual growth rate of 16.6%. And as I spend more time in this industry as the years go on, the less I want to listen to any of these outlandish projections looking 6 years on, because obviously there's no way to know that these are accurate or not. However, if you did want to check this out, you can, and it's available, made by researchandmarkets.com here. So just wanted to share that because obviously, yes, this market only has more room to grow, not like it's getting any smaller over time. While this one from Marijuana Moment, as the cannabis banking reform cleared the House floor again following committee action on a large-scale bill. And so while this is more of the same, the fact that it's going to vote for the 6th time is almost unbelievable, but good news is that the floor vote is expected later this week. If approved, it would mark the 6th time that Perlmutter's cannabis measure has advanced through the House in some form. And this gives us a bigger picture as to where the bottleneck issue is. Seems to be the Senate, because it can get through the House 5 times. It's going to be the 6th time. It just can't get through the Senate. And that's obviously the biggest obstacle, as we know, because this bastard does not want to work for the American people. As Schumer gives update on federal cannabis legalization and banking in meeting with equity advocates. And I almost was reluctant to share this because I don't want to look at this man's face anymore. But it's just funny that he's touting the same message, which is obviously probably fooling the people that trust him. And it's his purposeful lack of action that's really exposing social equity as the farce that it is at this point, because we're just getting more of the same Schumer. As activists involved in the Tuesday meeting told Marijuana Moment that Schumer again gave vague details about the timeline for filing the Cannabis Administration Opportunity Act, saying it will be done soon. He's been saying that for a year now, and he did say that he also expects committee hearings to follow after its introduction. While we know that this bill is dead on arrival, what would be smart of Schumer is to come together with the Republicans and focus on a bipartisan effort of passing some version of Nancy Mace's States Reform Act. We're not likely going to see that because Schumer can't think otherwise, but that would be the best thing going forward. While cannabis banking, immigration issues related to cannabis, and the implementation of New York's adult use cannabis program were also discussed in the Zoom meeting, which lasted a little under an hour. Schumer's staffers, certainly not Schumer, characterized the discussion as an exciting meeting on social equity in federal cannabis reform in a tweet on Friday before copy and pasting the same crap they've been spewing for 12 months. We're working to end the prohibition and ensure equity for communities impacted by the war on drugs, especially communities of color. And so thank you, Schumer, for teaching us that talk is cheap, but for anyone following this for more than a year at this point is well aware that the best way to ensure equity for those impacted by the war on drugs is to pass safe banking so that they can get affordable access to capital, so they can actually get a head start in this industry before Schumer's delaying allows the big boys to monopolize it. And so on to some tweets. This one comes from Vinny at MSOelevator. Thank you for sharing this one, as he says, I didn't record the first part, but Tommy Chong claimed he was just at the White House and talked to Hunter and Joe Biden, and says in a jovial tone, we're going to get it legal probably this year. And so while the clip doesn't mention the Hunter and Joe part, just big shout out to Cheech and Chong for sticking with us for this long and helping us get closer to the finish line.
Hey, whatever it takes.
We're going to get it legal probably this year. So that's what we got on our plate.
Big claim.
Right now.
And so love to hear that, but just wanted to share this clip as, again, coming from Chong says a lot more than coming from any politician, I'd say. Well, this one comes from Puff Daddy, so thank you for sharing this one and summarizing this information easily, as the data for the Ohio Provisional Licenses Awards is in here if you wanted to grab the raw data. But thank you, Puff Daddy, for summarizing that Trulieve won 4 licenses, C21 won 7 licenses, Curaleaf won 5 licenses, and Air won 4. So good to see Ohio expanding, especially as they are planning to at least put legalization on the 2022 ballot, and they are probably one of the states that are more likely to move to adult use sooner than some of the others. And so on to some other snippets from investment firms. Thank you, Todd Harrison, for sharing this one. This is from BTIG on safe banking, so I'm not going to read through it, but just going to share it so you can pause to read if you want. And this is just more information that you can juggle with what you already know and help you make any decisions going forward. So we got some other ones. This is Camilo on New Jersey cannabis from Todd Harrison, so thank you for sharing. We're also hearing that state officials are now moving with urgency to launch the program. That's great news, because that certainly hasn't been the sentiment we've been getting, and would expect New Jersey to launch in the next 1 to 2 months. So maybe someone told them, hey, get moving on things. And so if you wanted to read more, you can pause to read here, but this is a snippet that talks about a little bit more on the development from New Jersey from Camilo, who I think is also from BTIG. And then lastly, this is Camilo at BTIG. So all from BTIG, but 3 different snippets in need of a spark, and we may have just gotten one. Note earlier blurb was from the BTIG policy wonk, but keep in mind this is actually just from Monday morning. This didn't even involve what we saw yesterday, so obviously that's promising. But this one here you can pause to read if you want. Otherwise, all the links will be below to grab to reference if you can't see them clearly this way. And so on to this one from DenisRudev. From the looks of it, he's a fund manager for the Hadron Healthcare Fund, looking into alternative healthcare investments in the U.S., and he has certainly found the most undervalued sector. But the main reason I want to share all these snippets is because they pay for access to these snippets, and I do not pay for access. So that's why I wouldn't get them, and I just want to share any bit of information that we can use to take in, juggle with what we already know, and help us make better decisions going forward. So again, highlighting pure facts. The cannabis sector in the US is just getting stronger and stronger, let alone the market is getting bigger and bigger, and room for future growth is enormous. And so this one looks at MSOs versus other industries and comes from 8 Capital, looking at the enterprise value divided by 2023 EBITDA estimates, comparing MSOs to other industries. While this one takes a look at MSOs offer more attractive growth and margin profile than CPG and high growth retail. So if we look across the board, CPG growth numbers for full year 2023 sales growth and EBITDA margin, we see CPG, high growth retail, top LPs, MSOs, and MSOs leading the way. Across the board here as well, CPG, high growth retail, MSOs leading the way for full year enterprise value divided by 2023 EBITDA numbers. And so this one comes from AGP, not 8 Capital. But then we've got more from Denis. So again, thank you for sharing this. As numbers improving materially, constantly growing market size, more states are set to launch adult use cannabis, decreasing cost of capital, bargain valuations of pot stocks, and healthy balance sheets of canna players. The train must leave and will be, or the train might leave and will be hard to catch. And so just to share more, this one comes from MJ Biz Daily from Needham Company, U.S. cannabis industry revenue and economic impact. As cannabis operations are captive to each state, the economic multiplier impact in those states is 3 to 4 times revenue. While cannabis capital investment, looking at 7 of the largest public MSOs, capital investment has grown substantially over the past 2 years. In our view, it is likely that investments will continue to grow at a fast pace given our current projects under development and capital allocation plans for 2021 to 2022. So you can pause to read. This one again comes from Needham. Well, this last one, I've showed this one many times from Needham as well, but MSO debt expense says again, cost of debt for the top MSOs have fallen drastically as debt markets acknowledge improving fundamentals and MSOs seek non-dilutive capital in an equity price suppressed environment. And so lastly, he shared that one, and then also there's this tweet too. So this link will also be below, but this is just more from Needham, taking a look at US adult consumption rates over time, typically trending upwards. Well, this last one looks at the top 10 US state markets since inception up until 2021 and what Needham anticipates we're going to see from 2021 going forward into 2026. So you can go back and pause to read all the snippets. Otherwise, if they're blurry, you can grab all the links below, but this is good because it tells us what we know, that the fundamentals are very strong. They're only getting better, and while the price action hasn't made sense for a very long time, yesterday it made a lot more sense, and hopefully we see a lot more of what we saw yesterday. So on to some state news, as this one comes from the Office of Medical Cannabis Use from Florida from January 28th. Florida's qualified patient count seeing a massive jump this past week, adding 5,275 patients for a total of 669,707, which we love to see because typically from the past year, especially over winter, we've seen roughly 2,000 to 3,000 patients a week, but to see that to jump up to 5,000 is a great sign. Well, for this past week, we just see that one dispensary opened up, which was Sunnyside, owned by Cresco Labs, and I covered that on my Sunday's video. But lastly, if we take a look from January 21st to the 27th, we can look at the number of milligrams of THC sold, number of milligrams of CBD sold, and number of ounces of smokable flower sold for all individual MSOs operating in the state. And so if you own any of these individually as well, you can check week over week whether they are gaining, losing, or just maintaining their market share and staying relevant in this very competitive state of Florida. And on to this one from Columbia Care, news out of MSOs, as they plan to report their fourth quarter and full year 2021 results on March 15th, 2022. So this is the third MSO to report, announcing that they will release their numbers after market close on Tuesday, March 15th. Following the release of financial results, company management will conduct a conference call at 5 p.m. EST to discuss financial and operating results for the fourth quarter and full year of 2021. So love to see that as more MSOs are announcing their earnings date in March. Well, this one is a Cantech letter in an article about Trulieve, saying that Trulieve cannabis is a screaming buy, says Beacon Securities. And while I am a Trulieve shareholder and I do agree, this is not advice, but this article is below if you wanted to check it out. So yeah, I'll just leave this snippet here. You can pause to read. Otherwise, if you want to learn more about the whole article, you can grab it below. But just wanted to share this as it could be relevant to anyone interested in Trulieve. This Wall Street Journal article is titled "Crashing Pot Stocks Are Flush with Cash." And while the Tier 1 MSOs are very flush with cash, they're certainly no longer crashing. And then they add shares in U.S. cannabis companies are plunging, but they are less dependable on a bullish stock market than they used to be. Well, obviously, they've never been dependable on a bullish stock market because a company and the stock are two completely different things. But the main thing is that shares in these companies are no longer plunging either. And if yesterday is a sign of anything to come, it really highlights how undervalued these companies are and that they are a coiled spring waiting to pop. But the main reason I shared this is because this article looked into Curaleaf and GreenThumb industries. So much like this one was just a piece on Trulieve if you wanted to learn more, and again, not advice, but more information on a company if you're interested in Trulieve. This one was an article with more information on Curaleaf and GreenThumb. So just wanted to share this if you were bulls on GreenThumb and Curaleaf and wanted to read this with more information on it. And so unfortunately, I did click on the link many times, so it's gotten me stuck behind a paywall. But the first time I read it, I was able to read the whole thing. So hopefully, if you want to read more on Curaleaf and GreenThumb, you can grab the link below and check that one out. And so on to some other news from MJ Biz Daily. As Virginia legislators propose changes to recreational cannabis law, Republican lawmakers in Virginia have filed a flurry of bills that would make critical changes to the recreational cannabis law enacted last year by Democrats that wanted to wait until 2024 to launch. Some that would help businesses other than threaten social equity efforts. So who knew that the Republican lawmakers would come in and save the day in Virginia? And proposed changes include moving up the retail sales launch from 2024 and slashing the overall tax rate from 21% to 10% according to the Associated Press. So great news out of Virginia, so love to see the progress, and I will continue to update this story as it evolves, and hopefully we can see these bills become reality sooner than later. While Minnesota medical cannabis program to offer dried cannabis flower starting March 1st. And this is a huge win for all medical patients in Minnesota, as patients and caregivers in the program will be able to consult with pharmacists about eligibility starting this month. And so while this is great for all medical patients, it's worth noting that Minnesota is pushing for adult use as well this year, as I related in my last week's video. And so this is also big for obviously, Verano now, who just bought Goodness Growth, who had the largest footprint in Minnesota, and GreenThumb Industries, from my understanding, who also has a footprint. So it's now Verano and GreenThumb who definitely stand to benefit the most from this change in Minnesota, as well as the patients in Minnesota. Well, lastly, just wanted to share a new study. Medical cannabis used as an alternative treatment for chronic pain demonstrate reduction in chronic opioid use. A prospective study telling us what we already know, that cannabis is more of an exit drug from opioid addiction than anything else. And so the background, chronic opioid therapy has been used to treat many chronic pain conditions, even with poor evidence for its long-term effectiveness. Medical cannabis has emerged with certain pain relieving properties, which has led to questions as to its potential application. Let me zoom in here. That makes it much better, especially in relation to its effects on opioid use. And so one thing we just want to take away from here is that daily morphine milligram equivalent, that is what MME stands for, the daily morphine milligram equivalent. So if we look at the results, there was a 61.7% average decrease in daily, what is it again? Morphine milligram equivalent per patient from 49.6 to 16.4 morphine milligram equivalent. At the first follow-up, there was a 73.3% decrease in morphine milligram equivalent at second follow-up from 49.9 to 13.3 MME, providing more evidence that cannabis is actually an exit drug and never the gateway drug that prohibitionists falsely claim, concluding that allowing for a temporary short-term period where patients may trial medical cannabis while concomitantly gradually weaning off their COT is also essential in determining medical cannabis's individual effectiveness for the patient's specific type of chronic pain, which should serve to maximize long-term opioid reduction results and hence decrease opioid-related overdose deaths. So ultimately, access to medical cannabis will reduce opioid-related overdose deaths over time. And that is something worth fighting for and why we ought to deschedule this plant. Lastly, just wanted to share this really cool infographic from the Visual Capitalist looking at cannabis and alcohol and industry comparison over time. And while I do think it's very difficult to compare these two substances because they're so different, I do think cannabis is going to follow in the alcohol industry's footsteps and be very, very large globally and even larger than alcohol. And so if you want to check out more about that, you can grab all the links below. But that is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Sunday for This Week in Cannabis News. Have a great week, everybody.